This lesson will cover Chapter 13 on urban patterns, focusing on Key Issue 3, Why do urban areas expand? First, we will take on the origin and growth of suburbs. Then we'll get into suburban sprawl, then suburban segregation, legacy of public transport, and lastly, reliance on motor vehicles. Focusing on suburbs, we should first know what a suburb is. It's a residential or commercial area that's situated within an urban area but outside a central city. Suburbs have existed on a small scale since ancient times, but residential areas were often located outside the walls of the surrounding city. As cities grew rapidly during the 19th century as part of the Industrial Revolution, more extensive suburbs appeared. Suburbs offer varied attractions like a detached single-family dwelling rather than a row house or an apartment. Also, you will expect private land surrounding the house, space to park cars, and a greater opportunity for home ownership. Along with space and privacy, it can also be seen as a daily retreat from stress of urban living. Families with children are especially attracted to the suburbs because it offers more space for play and protection from high crime rates and heavy traffic that are characterized in an inner city. Families also tend to be more concerned with better school systems, which are often found in suburban areas. Cities are surrounded by a collection of suburban jurisdictions, whose residents prefer to remain legally independent of a large city. The process of legally adding land area to a city is called annexation. Annexation was once desirable and popular. Residents generally desired annexation in the 19th century because the city offered better services like water supply, sewage disposal, trash pickup, paved streets, public transportation, and police and fire protection. However, today it's now common for peripheral areas to organize their own municipalities. In recent decades, cities have been less likely to annex peripheral land because the residents have preferred to organize their own services rather than pay city taxes for them. Because of the increased difficulty in annexing suburban jurisdictions, local government in the United States is extremely fragmented. Special districts are organized to provide special services like fire protection, water supply, libraries, and public transportation. But the United States and their recent fragmentation issue or challenge has made it very difficult to solve regional problems of traffic management, solid waste disposal, and the building of affordable housing. Several U.S. states have taken steps to curb suburban growth. The goal is to produce a pattern of compact and contiguous development and protect rural land for agriculture, recreation, and wildlife. Legislation and regulations to limit suburban growth and preserve farmland is called smart growth. Some examples of smart growth laws include discouraging the state from funding new highways and other projects that could extend suburban sprawl and destroy farmland. This instead encourages state development of money being allocated to fill in already urbanized areas. Take a look at Figure 13-42, looking at Chicago's annexation of the surrounding areas being very rapid in the 1800s, but slowing down considerably in the 1900s. In Figure 13-43, instead of the possibility of being annexed by St. Louis, many residents of St. Louis County have incorporated their own municipalities. As you can see in the map, St. Louis would be its own municipality, and all of these other local regions may also have their own individual laws and regulations in the way that they run things in their own municipalities. This map may demonstrate a metropolitan area, and within this metropolitan area, you may have the primary city, but many other fragmented local governments outside of it. And each of these local governments has varying degrees of resources available. Taking a look at figure 13-44, this is a reflection of smart growth. Oregon and Tennessee have defined growth boundaries within which new development must occur. So the new development here in this map must take place inside Portland, Oregon's urban growth boundary. The next topic we will discuss is suburban sprawl. Sprawl is relatively low-density suburbs not contiguous with the city. When private developers select new housing sites, they seek cheap land that can easily be prepared for construction, land that is not part of the existing built-up area. Sprawl is also fostered by the desire for many families to own large tracts of land. The peripheral model serves as a slight variation of the multiple nuclei model. It was also presented by one of the authors of that multiple nuclei model, Harris. And so in this model, the urban area consists of an inner city surrounded by a large suburban residential area and service nodes or nuclei tied together by a beltway or ring road. So the majority of the land that you see surrounding the central business district is going to be suburban, with lots of different multiple nuclei of different services. A density gradient is changing from urban core to a periphery. So what this means is that the number of houses per unit of land diminishes at distance from the center city as it increases. There are a couple of things that have altered the gradient, however, like the fact that fewer people are living in the center and the density gradient has a gap in the center where few people live. And then also there are fewer differences in density with urban areas. In other words, population declines have happened because of the abandonment of old housing. And at the same time, the density has increased on the periphery because of the construction of apartment and townhouse projects and the diffusion of suburbs across a larger area. A megalopolis is a continuous area of urbanization in the Northeast United States. For example, the metropolitan statistical area in the northeastern United States, from one continuous urban complex extending from the northern region of Boston to the southern region of Washington, D.C., would be this megalopolis. Check out figure 13-45. This shows you what a peripheral model, that modified multiple nuclei model, would look like. So you see the central business district, then you see the majority of the green belt is held by suburban housing, and then you see the different pockets of services and industry within that and surrounding that. Image B on the right shows Tyson's Corner, and that's in Virginia. It's an example of an edge city outside of Washington, D.C. Figure 13-46 shows that in 1900, Cleveland had a strong density gradient with high densities at the center and low densities farther out, but suburbanization has flattened that density gradient. So you don't see the same patterns, and you actually see more of a concentration further out. Figure 13-47 shows that long stretch of contiguous urbanization stretching from Boston to Washington. Again, this would be known as the megalopolis. Land use planning is a lot stricter in Europe than it is in the United States. And figure 13-48 shows that land use planning in the UK, for example, directs new development to be contiguous with already existing urbanization. In the United States, there's more likelihood, or it's more feasible to allow for greater sprawl outside the already urbanized area. Low-income people and minorities are unable to live in many U.S. suburbs because of the high cost of housing and unwelcoming attitudes of established residents. A lot of people in these suburban areas fear that property values will decline if the high status composition of the neighborhood is altered. The homogeneity in suburban communities is legally protected through zoning ordinances. A zoning ordinance is a law that limits the permitted use of land and maximum density of development in a community. Zoning ordinances typically identify districts designed for single-family houses, apartments, industry, or commerce. Low-income families may have difficulty finding affordable housing through provisions such as requiring each house to sit on a large lot and prohibiting apartments. Fences are often built around some suburban housing districts, and visitors have to check in at a gatehouse to enter. Take a look at Figure 13-49. You can see a gated community in Orlando, Florida, and it represents one form of residential segregation. Low-income people cannot purchase homes or travel without invitation here. Taking a look at Figure 13-50, we see that retail services that were once located in or near the central business district have followed wealthy residents to the suburbs. As you can see here, in Columbus, Ohio, some business services have also relocated. The Easton Town Center happens to be a suburban shopping mall that you see pictured here. It's actually designed to look much like one that would be in a central business district. Figure 13-51 shows that the suburbanization in the U.S. has relied on motor vehicles. Public transportation peaked in the 1940s, but today ridership pales in comparison to many in other developed countries. In hundreds of cities around the world, extensive networks of bus, tram, and subway have been maintained, and funds for new construction have been provided also. Although public transport may be really popular in some of the larger cities or urban areas in the United States, it is not to any extent the same as it is in developed countries, and most people are relying on automobiles to travel. Take a look at Figure 13-53. This is Munich, Germany, and it's very typical of many public transportation-oriented cities to be in developed countries. Shown here are Munich's underground railroad system, the elevated rail to the left in A, the streetcar in B, and C just demonstrates its different systems. There are 5 transportation epochs in the United States. This means that over a span of time, there have been 5 major innovations that have really revolutionized transportation. The first is the sail wagon epoch from 1790 to 1830. Urban areas were clustered along the Atlantic coast, and communication was primarily by wind-powered ships plying up and down the Atlantic coast. The Iron Horse epoch from 1830 to 1870 was where the steam engine made it possible for ships to travel much faster to reach inland locations. The steel rail epoch happened between 1870 and 1920, and it was the long-haul rail lines that connected urban areas around the country. The auto-air amenity epoch was what happened between 1920 to 1970, and it included the internal combustion engine, making it possible for motor vehicles to become the dominant mode of transportation, as well as gasoline-powered airplanes. The last epoch, which was instigated in 1970 and still going on, is the current era, and it's characterized by the ability to communicate electronically as well as to control transportation systems electronically. So again, just to narrow that down, the sail wagon time period is when we saw innovations through wind-powered ships. The Iron Horse time period is when we saw steam-powered railroads. The steel rail time period is when we saw long-haul rail lines. And then the auto-air amenity time period is when we saw many automobiles as well as airplanes, and the satellite electronic jet propulsion era is when we see communications and transportation electronically. There are many pros and cons to using motor vehicles, which are abundant here in the United States. Some benefits are it's comfortable, you get a lot of choice, there's a lot of flexibility, you get privacy. It's also perceived to be a low cost, even though there are a lot of other costs associated, like insurance and registration and things like that. Some costs are that it's a terrible use of land, and the consumption speaks to overconsumption, and there's a lot of traffic congestion as well.